Hello, California, and welcome to this week's edition of Your Financial Compass, the show that's dedicated to helping you successfully navigate to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is Chris Bulman. He is the founder and a financial advisor at Bulman Wealth Group, and Scott Vlahon, financial advisor. Chris, Scott, it's always a joy to be with you. How are you this week?
Fantastic.
He's always
fun.
waiting for me to say something. So today is
it's another.
What did Chris do wrong? He's an irresponsible charger. We're always charging things. This is at 100%. He was scrambling before the show because he forgot to charge his iPad.
47%. Hey, it's diligent studying, you know.
Yes, so, yes. Well, yeah. Hey, I have faith in you. Even with or without the iPads, it's going to be a great show. So. Yeah. Awesome. Well, today we are going to be talking about one of the most important acronyms when it comes to your retirement. The reality is, we've talked about this before. This industry is full of acronyms, but we're going to be talking today about the one called RMD. Now, just to set up the context for this, I find a lot of folks who have already been working with a financial advisor for years have never even had a conversation with their current advisor about RMDs. I joke that they stand for really mean and dastardly, or rotten, miserable, disgusting. That's not what they actually mean. So let's start off. What do RMDs actually mean?
Well, I thought that's what it did mean, so unless you have a better definition. Whoop.
I'd say, in your 20s, 30s, well, probably 30s, you start for the first time learning a little bit about back pain. In your 40s, you definitely get some back pain.
Right.
40s and 50s, you have knee pain, hip pain, back pain.
Yes.
60s, we start hearing about RMDs, those required minimum distributions. And it's also another pain in the rear. So it's required minimum distributions is what it stands for. And the word required is there because the government requires you to start taking a minimum distribution from your qualified accounts. The majority of qualified accounts, not all, there's a few that you don't have to, but 401ks, 403bs, 457,
any of these
IRAs,
tax-deferred accounts,
anything that was tax-deferred, and the government's been letting you defer those taxes for all these years. Now that your income is probably set, you're at the level that you need, or you're at the highest level you've ever been, potentially, now they're going to say, okay, you're going to have to take more. We're not going to defer this any longer. So that's what a required minimum distribution is.
And let's next talk about why they're so critical. What is it that folks need to understand about what these RMDs can potentially do to their retirement plan?
Well, one reason they're critical is they're mandatory. There's no way around them, and I'll explain the penalty in a second. So first off is understanding the age. The age and when you need to take them. It's always changing. For the longest time, it was 70 and a half. Then the Secure Act turned it into 72. Secure Act 2.0 just recently changed it to 73. Then by 2033, if you haven't started RMDs, it's 75. So they're always kind of pushing out the goalpost. So it's understanding when are you supposed to be taking it. If you haven't started yet, that's something that we can certainly help you with. But when it comes to missteps, as you referenced earlier, and you've told us before, you've got some friends that hey, we've never had this discussion.
Never even
My
heard about
husband's
it, right?
70 and he's coming up on the precipice of it. If you don't take it, well, if anything you pull, obviously why they want it is so you can pull it out and the government gets their taxable revenue.
Because you're paying the tax bill on that money that's been taxed.
That's right. So if your RMD is 50 grand in a given year, even if you don't need it, you have to take that amount out of your accounts, and then your income increases by, in this case, 50,000, and you're paying taxes on that extra 50,000. We get questions a lot. Is there a way around it? Legally, no. So then it's what if I don't take it? Well, there's called an excise tax, not exorcist tax, excise tax, where in the past, and it's still kind of a fluid thing, where it was whatever amount you needed to take 50 and you took 20, well, you would have the excise tax on that 30,000 you didn't take, and it used to be 50%. They're trying to bring that penalty down to 25%. The point is, don't miss it, because it creates even more problems than it already presents in the first place.
And just to clarify, it's not only then that you have to pay the tax on the amount that you took out, but you're now getting hit with an additional 25% penalty on the amount that you didn't withdraw. We don't want you to have to pay that penalty. So that's why this subject is so critical to understand. I think the next thing that can be very confusing for folks is understanding how to calculate the RMD. So let's talk about what the calculation, all that goes into that piece of it.
Yeah, so the calculation is interesting. It's what they call a divisor, which I feel like it should just be a percentage, because it comes out to a little bit less than 4% your first year at age 73. But there's a divisor scale. It's on the IRS website, actually. And there's different tables depending on if you're married, if you're single, if it's an inherited IRA. So I don't want to get into all the details here today because it can be different depending on who you are and what your situation is. But there are tables that tell you exactly what the divisors are, how much you have to take. It's based on the year-end previous value. So last December 31st, whatever that value,
right.
You got it.
Yep.
So whatever your December 31st statement says for your IRA, and we'll get into, it can be for multiple IRAs. It's a whole mess, because a lot of people have multiple. They have 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 different IRAs.
Right.
And there's a certain formula that goes into, you can take it all from one, you can take it to multiple, but it's based on those things. There's also something called a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution, that you can do, where you can distribute the money directly to a qualified charity, and then you can write the whole amount off, so it doesn't count as income if you don't need the income.
Right.
What we found is a lot of our clients, they could have $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million in their IRAs. They don't need any of that income.
Right.
But now the government's telling them, based on your age, based on last year's account value, based on the divisor, you have to take $40,000, $80,000. I've got some people $300,000, $400,000 a year income they have to take.
Right.
They don't need $1 of it, but the government makes them take it, pay $100,000 in taxes, and then basically just put the rest back into an investment account or the bank or wherever they're going to put it.
Sure. Right.
And there's so many rules, like Chris just referenced. Then there's more rules as to when to start. And there's nothing my wife and I love more than to spend a date night going through IRS code. We just love it. And,
that's riveting, Scott.
Yeah, there's thousands.
How romantic!
Thousands of pages.
I think we need to work on that.
She's so excited. But we get the question a lot of, okay, when do I have to start my first one? So say John or Jane Doe is turning 73 in a given year. Now that the age has changed, you have to take it at 73. Well, they have that first year, they have up until tax time of the following year to take it. So say April 15th, for example. So say you're supposed to take it in 2023, your first RMD, you can wait until April, tax time, April 15th of the following year for your first one. However, if you put it off like that, then next year, technically you have to take 2. Because then you'd have to take the 2024 RMD that next year. So it's like, generally you want to take it in the year that you're supposed to. And it just, if this is confusing to you, and how could it not be, and these are things you have questions with, maybe as Chris referenced, you've got $1 million, all this money in these IRAs or 401ks, you're like, okay, I'm getting to that age. When do I need to take it? What does it mean? What are some tax strategies, or Chris referenced the charitable element of it. If those questions come to mind and you're confused, then you can use the link, call the number below, and we can schedule a complimentary consultation. We can talk about this. We can talk about all the other things that go into financial planning, and just add some more clarity to it. Is a very murky scenario.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, Chris, I'm so glad we're diving into this today. We have so much more to get into, but this is a great opportunity for you to pick up the phone, call that number on the bottom of your screen to be able to set up a time to get your very own complimentary financial compass review from Chris and Scott and the team at Bulman Wealth. You're going to get a comprehensive full financial picture of your situation, and if RMDs are of concern to you, they'll be glad to walk you through that piece of it as well. Simply dial 888-970-4685, or you're welcome to take out your smartphone. You can open up that camera app, just point and scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team will reach out and connect with you to schedule your complimentary visit that way as well. When we come back, we're going to be diving into the 6 common traps that folks fall into when it comes to RMDs, because we want to make sure that you avoid making those mistakes. Stay with us.
I became a financial advisor coming out of the tough times of the tech bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Moved to California, uprooted my life, changed everything, and then 9/11 happened the first week in this industry. I was prepared already to help people from tough times coming out of the tech bubble, but what we didn't expect is there were 3 years in a row when I started of the market dropping. That really impacted my whole career. It crafted and created how we manage money. We don't want our clients to ever lose like that. And so Everything we do is built on protection. The goal of our practice and the people that we meet with is to remove the fear and uncertainty that we all face, and it goes back to those first years in the market.
I was a sportscaster on television. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. In TV, you bounce around, and went to Mississippi and worked at the NBC station there and covered, college football's big, NFL's big, all that stuff. And a guy I knew relatively well in a different state decided to get out of TV, and in this opportunity, I always enjoyed finance and money, and it seemed really exciting. I like to communicate to folks and feel like I can communicate well. It was such a fresh, kind of different career than what I was used to that it was exciting.
We go into every meeting with no place to get. We're there to meet with you, to discover your needs, find out where you are at that point, and how we can help you build and craft that plan for the future.
Welcome back. You're watching Your Financial Compass. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon from Bulman Wealth Group. We are having a very important discussion today about all things RMD related, your required minimum distributions. This is something that affects every single person in retirement. And if I had to give this show a name, I would actually call it Don't Try This at Home, because there are so many traps that folks can unknowingly fall into if they're trying to handle their RMDs on their own. So we're going to go through these 6 traps now. And Chris, Scott, gosh, so much to get into, but trap number 1, you already presenced this. The rules are very confusing. I joke it's almost like an April Fool's joke, because technically now the rule has changed. It used to be that you could wait to take your first RMD till April 1st of the year following the year you turn 70 and a half. Then, who knows that off the top of their head, right? Yeah. Then it changes 72. Currently it's 73. For those of us who are younger, it will be 75 in the future. So let's talk about this trap, though. You mentioned this, but just to re-presence this, why is that a trap to wait until April following the year you turn 73?
Well, I think this is a great question. I think the first thing is we should be good stewards of our money, number one. And if there are better ways to do things, we should know the options before we just say, well, I don't have to take it until April of next year, so I'll wait until April of next year.
And blindly follow and do that,
and just, right? Yes. Yep. So if we look at the numbers and we say, okay, well, if we go ahead and take it this year, the downside is we're going to get taxed on it this year. But if we wait till next year, the downside is we're going to get taxed on it next year, and we also have to take next year's distribution. So
in that calendar year.
In that calendar year. So if we have to take it this year, maybe the distribution is, if you have $1 million, maybe it's around $38,000, $39,000. And so if we take it this year, that's going to add onto our income as regular income, be taxed as regular income. And so we say, well, maybe we don't want to do that. If we wait until next year, now we've got to take the $38,000 plus $40,000 the next year. So now we've got almost $80,000 additional income. Right. Potentially that pushes us into another tax bracket.
Exactly.
So another way to look at it is, well, what if we do take it this year? We don't need the money. We already know that. We don't really want to pay taxes on it. Maybe we have money in our bank. Maybe we go ahead and take it, convert it to a Roth IRA, do a Roth conversion, get more money in the Roth, change that money from forever taxed to never taxed, never again taxed, and use the money in our savings account or CDs or idle money that isn't doing much to pay those taxes. And now we have another chunk of money in that Roth IRA that's going to grow tax-free forever.
Right. It's such a good way to think about it, because again, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And that's the case with this first trap. I think about your clients who are taking RMDs of $300,000, $400,000. You take 2 in 1 year, that's $600,000, $800,000. I mean, talk about the tax burden then. So important to understand. All right. Trap number 2. Failure to adjust your RMD if you're still working. Explain why this is a trap.
So yeah, it's one of those things where, we're finding that a lot of folks are continuing to work on into their 70s, 73 and beyond in this case. And say that's you and you're still working, you're 73. It's plan dependent, meaning it depends on which 401k plan you have. But many of them say that if you're still working, you're over 73, whatever you have in that 401k, you don't have to take an RMD from it.
From that account.
From that account. If you have an IRA, then you have to, outside of work, then you have to take it from there. So again, it's a bit confusing. And it's about understanding, finding out first off, talk to HR, talk to us, and we can help call on your behalf. Does my 401k allow me to not take the RMD in that year? And again, that's because if you don't have that provision, you don't want to get, kind of a surprise penalty when you didn't take it. So it's just understanding what are the rules of the current 401k you are in, and then planning around that. But you have to have that clarity first.
Right, because again, to your point, let's say that you don't have to take it from that plan, but you don't take it from your IRA, then wham, you're hit with that 25% penalty again. So important to know for sure. All right, trap number 3. Failure to use the correct account value to determine the RMD total that you must take. You touched on this, Chris, but let's go back to that.
Yeah, so a lot of people viewing right now, they own multiple IRAs, right? So maybe or 401ks even. Some people come and see us, they call us and they say, I still have a 401k from 20 years ago, from the 80s,
right?
and I have one from the 90s, I have one from the 2000s, and I just never did anything, and you know. And so what happens is there's an aggregate number. So we have to look at December 31st. If you're watching and you have 2 IRAs, 4 IRAs, or 401ks, whatever they are, you have to take the total amount from December 31st the previous year, and then use the divisor. Let's say it's $1 million, and your divisor says that you have to take $39,000. Then you can take it all from one account, or you can spread it amongst the 3 or 4 accounts.
Right.
But that's something that we can certainly help with as well, because you want to understand which particular account you may want to be taking it from.
Right.
Maybe you have an account that isn't growing very much, and you want to pull it from that account versus other ones that you know are going to, or you're confident that they're going to grow in the future. Maybe you have it all in Amazon or Tesla or something, and you don't want to take it right now from that account because you think, for example, in 2022, Tesla was down 70%. You don't want to pull it out of that account.
Right, well, it's down, right.
Exactly, so maybe you want to wait until that one bounces back. And pull it out of a different account. So there's a lot of strategies that can be incorporated when you're looking at this.
Right. Well, and specifically the date of the account value, you talked about this before, it has to be the account value as of December 31st of the prior year. And I think a lot of folks, when they try to do this on their own, they might take a different number of point, date, and time.
Yes.
And nothing's worse than you think you've done it correctly, but wham, you're hit with a 25% penalty because you used the wrong account value in the calculation. So again, this is why that is so critical. All right, trap number 4, failure to take your RMD from the proper account. So you just touched on this a little bit, but let's expand on that.
It gets more exciting, guys. Wow.
Right?
If you're on the edge of your seat, you should be. So as Chris was referencing, a lot of us over the years have, I joke, collected these accounts. We have IRAs, we have 401ks. When we're compiling them, though, it gets intricate as to where the money's coming from. It's easy if you have multiple IRAs. Then, as Chris said, say that amount is $40,000. It can all come from one account or another, or even throughout the different IRAs. However, if you have old 401ks from old jobs that have not been rolled over into an IRA, the 401k rule is you have to take that exact amount from each 401k or 457 or 403b. So there is a difference there with the 400 numbers or the IRAs, an understanding of IRAs is an easier kind of equation to work with. The 400 numbers is not, where it gets even more intricate. So it's understanding am I taking the proper amount from the proper account? Hey, that could have been the show title.
Right.
It's really fun.
That's a very important question. Am I taking the proper amount from the proper account?
And tax laws continue to change annually.
Correct.
So you have to talk to an advisor that is staying up on the tax laws, that understands that we have to visit and see what the rules are, because they do continue to change.
Right. Nothing's worse than playing a game you don't have the rules to. That's not fun for anyone, right? All right, well, trap number 5 is failure to calculate your life expectancy annually. This is an interesting one, but another trap a lot of folks fall into if they're trying to do this on their own. So explain what we mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the lifetime table that you have to look at. Number one, you go to the IRS website or talk to us. There are worksheets that you can use, or we can help you use, that's going to use the divisors given by the IRS to tell you the amount you need to take. And it can change every year. It will change every year.
And why does it change every year?
Well, two reasons, big reasons. One, the value goes up or down.
Right.
Your life expectancy gets shorter.
Right.
As your life expectancy gets shorter, every year we get older. I don't know if anyone's told us this. We get closer to death, right? So as we get closer to death, they want a higher and higher and higher amount of as a percentage or as a divisor. So they want more, and our account could have either gone down or up.
Right.
So if they want more and our account's gone down, potentially it's a lower number, but if our account's gone up, it could be a much higher number.
Right.
So it's important to look at that every year based on that December 31st date.
For sure. And that's a common trap, because I think people, when they calculate the first RMD, they're like, oh, okay, this will be my amount.
Right.
Nope, it's going to change every year, because as Chris shared, we are getting closer to the end of our life. And so that divisor does change. All right, and then finally, this is a loaded one as well. Trap number 6 is failure to handle RMDs from an inherited IRA correctly. This is huge for a lot of folks.
It is huge, and again, it's another moving target, and it really, one of the biggest differentiators is the spouse inheriting an IRA or non-spouse. So if a spouse, say a husband passes, and he's passing on an IRA account to the spouse, well, then she just inherits it as if it was hers all along. And then she plays into the same age rules and everything. Where it's changed over the last few years with a non-spousal inherited IRA with the newest Secure Act is the timelines have changed. I won't even bore you to death with the old details. The current details are this. Say a mother passes and she's leaving IRAs to, I have a client who've done this recently. The client inherited some IRAs. She's in her 30s, but the timeline is she's gotten all this money. It's almost $500,000. She has the next 10 years to liquidate it, if she needs the money or not. Right. So she's got $500,000. She's working as a teacher, earning her money. And on top of that, she has to start systematically taking this money out of this inherited IRA. So understand the timelines as opposed to a spouse inheriting it or a non-spouse. And if you're non-spouse, you literally have a decade to start pulling and liquidate all those funds.
Yeah, and this, we were talking earlier about why you need to talk to an advisor because tax laws continue to change.
Right.
Just a few years ago, we were doing entire presentations, radio shows, TV, about the stretch IRA. And the stretch IRA is how you can stretch the IRA to your kids and then your grandkids and then the next generation. For generations, you could stretch this tax deferral. Well, that's gone now.
Exactly.
That's all gone now based on the Secure Act 2.0. And now all that money has to come out within 10 years. And again, why?
The rules changed.
Think about it. All the money that was printed, the government needs that tax dollars, and they need it quick. And they're going to get it. If you look at all the baby boomers that have retired and are retiring right now and over the next 10, 15 years, and then as they pass on, all that money over the 10 years following is going to be taxed.
Yes, and in fact, that's set to be over $84 trillion is set to pass over the next several decades. It's going to be a lot.
Absolutely, yes.
So again, if you're at home and you're going, gosh, I haven't had these kind of conversations already with my current financial advisor. I didn't even know half these things today. We want you to know you're not alone. And while you don't need to be an expert in any of this, that's why Bulman Wealth Group is here to help and serve you. You just get to be an expert in you, and they will gladly help navigate these complexities of RMDs with you. Just call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685, or scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. More on today's show of Don't Try This at Home as it relates to RMDs right after this.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter, the one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon. We are talking today all about RMDs and what you need to know about them so that you don't fall prey to that hideous 25% penalty, right? We're trying to help folks avoid that and do this correctly. So I know you've mentioned earlier in the show, a lot of the clients you work with don't necessarily need the income that they're receiving from RMDs, yet as we know, we're required to take them when we reach RMD age. So how do you help folks navigate if that's their situation?
Yeah, I mean, a financial plan, starting as soon as possible, I can go back and tell stories about clients in their 40s coming in, both were doctors, and they're putting away all this money into their qualified plans. The hospitals are putting money into the plans. There's so much money getting put away, all tax deferred, that it all is really good. It's a good problem to have. But when we did the financial plan, I'll never forget the look on their face when I was scrolling down year by year, and I got down to age 72, 73, and they said, "What is that?" And their income jumped like drastically, exponentially, because that's the age they have to start taking those RMDs. And based on looking, in this case, 30 years ahead, they said, we have to change that. What are our options? And we began to look at options so that we're not putting all of our eggs in this one basket, which is the tax deferred basket. And I would say the same for if you're in your 50s, if you're in your 60s. If you want to know how this is going to impact your taxes in retirement, your income in retirement, then the sooner we can start planning, the better off we are. And maybe we start changing from investing in our 401k to our Roth 401k. Maybe we start changing from an IRA to a Roth IRA, and maybe we make too much income to contribute to
because
Roth.
Roth accounts don't require the RMD.
But there's income limits, but then maybe we look at what's called the backdoor Roth IRA. There are always different options to be looking at. And I think that what we do best at Bulman Wealth Group, and what Scott and I always tell our clients is, we're not going to always tell you the exact answer. We're going to give you the parameters to think about,
and the options.
The options, because everyone's answer is going to be a little bit different. But if you know what the options are, then we can choose the right vehicle, directly for you.
And another thing Chris referenced earlier in the show is, as we referenced, most of our clients don't need that money. And there's something called a qualified charitable distribution.
Another acronym, QCD,
Yeah, QCD. We're just full of acronyms. Wow. Chris has plenty more to share, I'm sure. Anyhow, what a QCD is up. You can say you take that RMD, you can essentially donate it to a qualified charity, and up to 100,000 a year. So say your RMD is 120,000. 100,000 of that could be given to a qualified charity. And just understanding what that means. Chris has a longtime client. They've been doing that for a while. Give to their local church. And there's a multitude of places to look, making sure they're a qualified charity first off, but then entertaining the idea to see if it makes sense in your situation to kind of further remove that tax burden or lower the tax burden.
Yeah, well, and the beautiful thing about that, the charity gets the full amount, you get the tax break for it as long as you don't touch it, right? It just has to go straight from the account to the charity, and that's a beautiful way. It's a win-win for everyone.
And the biggest thing is that if you haven't thought about these things and now you're curious, it all goes back to having that comprehensive financial plan. Maybe you've been thinking about doing one, you don't know where to start. Call the phone number, click on the link in the lower right-hand corner, and we'll help you out.
Wonderful. Chris, Scott, always a joy to be with you. We hope you found this to be educational and valuable at home. We appreciate you joining us. Again, that number to call to get your complimentary financial compass review, 888-970-4685. We appreciate you watching. We look forward to being back with you next time.